Yes. Okay. Cool, guys. Welcome back. Who's here on the first nutrition? Yeah. Cool. Chris was, but you know, he's texting. So.
I was on that.
You're on the Zoom call. Okay, cool. Well, let's go ahead and let's say your name and one thing you remember that stood out from you. If you were in the last call or on the last in the last session, one thing that you remember that was kind of a takeaway or something that resonated with you from our first class. And if you weren't here, would love to hear something that you're interested in learning about nutrition. Okay, so Andrew, do you want to start?
Yeah.
Hi, what's up?
Yeah, Andrew Thomas Sawyer. I asked you the question about meal. Should you eat 3 meals or 6 meals a day?
Uh-huh.
And you said it all depends.
All depends on what?
Just you individually.
Yeah, awesome. So what, based off of you, what did you think? What did you come up with?
3 is fine for me.
3 is fine for you? Okay. Cool. All right, good takeaway.
My name's Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy.
I was not here. I did not watch it yet. I was going to, but my mind is around nutrition for racing and just getting it dialed in for myself, and maybe I want to perform that.
Okay. We won't cover that specifically this class, but it's all leading into that, so it'll still be applicable.
Someday.
Okay.
I'm Neil. I learned we got rid of the food pyramid.
Nice. What do we replace it with?
The plate.
Yeah, my plate. Cool. And we're gonna recap. Yeah, we're gonna recap that today. So hang on to the actual plate contents.
Miles, this is my first time here. Guess I'm just super stoked to learn.
Cool. About everything. I like.
Sadie, takeaway from last week is mentality matters.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, we definitely touched on that.
Nate. It's my first time here, so what exactly are we doing?
Well, since it is your first time tuning into the nutrition class, what's something that you're really interested in learning about nutrition?
I guess just having a better grasp in general about, what I can be eating to help me kind of achieve some of my goals, as well as maybe learn some new recipes and stuff, so I don't just eat ramen noodles every night.
That's good. That's good to know. Okay, thanks, Nate. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Henry. This is my first time as well. I'm interested in most of it. Just kind of I'm definitely on this thing. I'm trying to improve everything about my health. So nutrition's probably one of the most important parts of it. So, yeah, I like what Jeremy had to say about powering my training and workouts and stuff, and just kind of taking it to a next level.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for being here, Henry.
I'm Jen. I didn't realize that fruits and vegetables are also carbs, and that stuck out of my head.
Which is important if you're thinking about, or in most recent trends with low carb diets.
Yes.
That really kind of includes, most people still keep the vegetables, but yeah, you're cutting out a lot of the good things that
and
you
how
need.
fruit can be good carbs to fuel workouts.
Absolutely. Cool. Thanks for that.
Mason, I remember that I thought was cool, the different portion sizes compared to your hand, and different hand sizes would be just different portions.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Chris, and I remember that you shouldn't play with your phone during class.
So you're gonna miss all the good info, Chris.
I'm trying to do better about that today.
Being present. Okay, I like it. And then let's go with our participants here real quick, just so we can get. So why don't we start with Sharon? Sharon, you can unmute yourself and just let us know what you're most interested in learning today, since you weren't here last time.
Hi, everybody. I'm a gastric sleeve patient, so I have a pretty strict meal plan I stick to. So I'm a little hesitant to do this class, but I'm excited to. I still think the concept's the same about the right food equals the right results. So I think it's a good reminder to, because I have a tendency to think, oh, a little bit of chocolate here, a little bit of this, and I always feel sluggish and shitty when I eat it. So I think to kind of be accountable in the community, just like in the gym, is something I'm looking forward to in the nutrition classes.
Thanks, Sharon. Glad you're here. Okay, so mute yourself, please, and then we'll go to Andy. Andy, can you?
Hey, it's Andy. Sorry, I got a sing-along in my background. Yeah, so I mean, as far as what I want this week or in general, or
a takeaway from last week that you remember.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say the biggest takeaway was towards the end, just to focus on the mindfulness and intuitiveness of nutrition and just a more healthy relationship with my nutrition, just being more mindful. Growing up for so long, it was either, like eat absolutely terrible, so whatever you want, or thinking that the way to eat healthy was that really structured, just scarf it down, boiled chicken, brown rice, and broccoli. And there's so much ways to be more mindful, be more intuitive, have just such a healthier relationship with nutrition, and be able to enjoy it as well. So
awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. And then Matt, we'll go to Matt, and then Danielle.
Hi, I'm Matt. I don't know. I have terrible memory. I don't remember much from last class. Probably the thing that sticks out the most was your story about the client you were working with who didn't want to eat the salad dressing because it was high calorie, but like the idea of it doesn't have to be perfect eating, where it's, as long as we're making progress and healthier choices.
Yeah.
There's a benefit to it.
Awesome. I'm glad that resonated. Thanks, Matt. And then Danielle, last but not least.
What I remember is just the mental part of it and portion size for sure.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you all tuning in, even though you can't be here. So I'm going to go back to speaker view here so you guys can see my board. So actually, Andy, what you said and what some of you guys touched on today, we're going to segue. So last time was a little more about balance, right? Balance in our lives, balance in our nutrition and our meals. Today we're kind of segueing into mindful and intuitive eating, kind of what you were talking about. We touched on that last time, but but I think it's really important before we jump into like the sports nutrition and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of what kinds of foods to eat and recipes and ways to actually apply these nutrition concepts. I want to get the concepts down first because that's the most important thing. And then when you learn the bigger concepts, then you can incorporate all that information in and apply it to your lives and your current schedule. But if we don't have the underlying foundation of how to approach nutrition, then all that stuff can get a little bit lost and confusing. So I did want to spend like a couple minutes early on in this portion just to review what we talked about last time in case some people weren't here, but then also to kind of, that repetitiveness in making sure we discuss it multiple times will be helpful to kind of get that in your head. So first things first, we talked a little bit about the My Plate, and that's what you brought up, Neil, but who remembers kind of what if we think of like 4 groups when you're trying to create a balanced meal, what are those 4 components, or what's one of the 4 components? Protein? Okay, so I think we had like, if we split it into 4, 1/4 is definitely a protein. So what are some good, healthy, lean proteins?
Chicken.
Fish, chicken.
Turkey.
What about some vegetarian options? Turkey.
Tofu.
Beans. Lentils. What about like nuts and seeds?
Oh yeah.
Nuts and seeds. We think about those for like kind of a fat source too, but they certainly have a good amount of protein in them. What about dairy?
Dairy's got protein.
Yeah. So like, what are some options?
Cottage cheese. Yeah.
Cottage
milk.
cheese,
Yogurt.
Greek yogurt, regular yogurt, all yogurts. Cheese. And again, like the cheese, nuts, and seeds, those are ones you have to be a little bit more mindful of because they do have a lot of fat. But yeah, so we've got dairy, we've got animal products, we've got vegetables or beans. Whole grains. Yeah, whole grains are actually, so that might be another category there, but there's a lot of crossover. So it's not to say things that are proteins can't fall into other categories too. So let's segue. What's another, like Miles, what did you say?
Oatmeal.
Yeah, so what's that fall under? What other category for our My Plate?
Grain.
A whole grain? Yeah, so we have like our grains, and we want most of them whole. We're gonna put whole grains. So let's explore that option real quick. What are some whole grains that we think of besides? We got oatmeal.
Rice count or what's
Rice is a grain. Yep, rice is a whole, and brown rice and some of our wild rices will be the whole grain, whereas like white rice has some of the grain stripped off of it, that like outer bran layer, which is why it's so white. And so sometimes that we're missing some of the nutrients in that we would get from brown rice or some wild rice grains if it's just white. So not to say that there's no room in your diet for white rice, it's just being mindful that that white rice it's kind of like white bread. It's a little bit stripped of some of those nutrients. What else?
Can you do bread?
And bread.
Yeah, so bread, a whole wheat bread is an option.
Sweet potatoes.
Sweet, and we'll actually, I would put sweet potatoes in this if we're doing like whole grains / starches. Potatoes would be certainly in this category too. So starchy vegetables, potatoes. What other vegetables might be starchy? Providing with some more like carbohydrates than
Potatoes.
carrots, potatoes, squash. Yeah.
Taters.
Peas is one of those kind of considered starchy vegetables. Corn is actually a whole grain, so popped corn. Popcorn is actually a whole grain.
Don't they make protein out of pea stuff?
Yeah, you can extract a lot of protein from it, but it's still got a good amount of carbs in it. Yeah, so we kind of hit the big points there. Obviously, all of your processed foods are also going to fall maybe not in the whole grains, but they're going to be in the grain section. So crackers, cookies, candy. Maybe not so much of the grain, but like anything that's made from like refined flour is going to be also in the grain categories. We want to make sure we're focused. All the ones we listed are going to be the ones we want to focus more so on. So what are the other two columns here?
Fat, yeah.
So actually, not for the plate. We kind of had fat as fat was kind of in this little area here because we do want to include it, but it's probably not the primary focus of our meal. Probably should, like we don't want a whole portion of our meal with a bunch of fat. So what are the other two? Vegetables. Okay. So when we see vegetables, we already talked about the starchy vegetables going here. So what kind of vegetables are we talking when we're thinking like
Broccoli,
non-starchy bread? Okay.
Cauliflower.
Cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, salad greens, kale,
Carrots.
Okay, what about non-green vegetables? We got the green ones. Peppers, carrots, I guess. Purple cabbage, onions. Onions would be a good one. Garlic, eggplant. Garlic's.
There's a lot of garlic if we can eat that.
Yeah, garlic. I don't know that it necessarily falls in. Maybe it would be. That's a good question. Maybe it is. But yeah, so lots of different types. We have lots of options for vegetables. And again, that takes up another quarter of the plate. And then what's the last one? Fruit. Okay, cool.
So you're supposed to have 25% of each one in every meal?
No.
So we'll talk about, and that's a great question. So Andrew asked if we should have it's equally distributed. And I would say for the most part, protein is pretty, regardless across the board, if you are active, very active versus inactive, your protein might look a little bit different. And this, we'll go into more of this during our sports nutrition or performance nutrition seminar. But for the most part, I would say the grain section is gonna be what changes based off your activity. Obviously, we're going to want most of it because whole fruits and vegetables are lowest calorie but highest nutrient, like most nutrients per calorie. We're going to always want to keep these in. Same with protein. It's the most satiating, or it keeps us feeling the most full out of all the macronutrients, out of proteins, carbs, and fat, even though it's not quite as high calorie as fat. So we kind of always want these three. You're still getting carbohydrates if you're eating fruit and your vegetables. So really this section here, depending on how active we are, we can decrease or increase that. So like an athlete who's training hours a day, their whole grain section might be like this big. Fruit becomes more of a snack on the side. Vegetables are still there, protein's still here, but now they need a lot more carbohydrates and starches and grains to fuel their activity.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
when you talk about protein, the protein shakes, the protein powders, what's the best protein powders to take?
We'll talk. I want to answer that question during our performance thing, but just for you, for the group here, I would, there's plenty of protein options. So in terms of bioavailability or what's going to be absorbed at the most, like if you have 25 grams of a protein shake and it's a whey protein or like a milk or dairy based or meat based protein, that we're usually going to absorb those a lot. We're going to absorb a lot more of those and than a plant-based protein, which is not to say you shouldn't go plant-based or include more plants in your diet, but you usually need, because you're not going to absorb all of it, if it's plant-based protein, then you're going to want to increase the amount of plant-based protein that you have in a day. So if you're trying to hit, you're trying to achieve 25 grams of protein at each meal, but most of your food intake is very plant-based and a lot of your protein is coming from plant options, you might want to increase that number to like 30 or 35 grams to account for malabsorption or a little bit less. But we'll cover all that and supplements too in our performance fund. Okay, so cool. So we've got this fats on the side. Obviously, we're gonna want to really focus on hydration and water consumption as most of our liquids throughout the day. But really, if we're focusing on like a little bit of fat and we want to identify these different areas on our plate, that really should be the foundation for building out our meals. If you check all these boxes at each meal, kind of like what we talked about last time, a lot of those hunger cravings or feeling the need to eat more and more and more can likely stem from having a missing area, becoming imbalanced, having an imbalanced plate, and that just not satisfying us throughout our meals. So a classic example, not to prolong this, but a classic example would be cereal for breakfast, right? So depending on the cereal, it could be really high in sugar. So we've got the whole grains, plus we've got, well, hopefully it's a whole grain cereal, but then we've also got a bunch of sugar added to it. A lot of time we might not add fruit to it. We probably aren't having vegetables. Most people miss their vegetables at breakfast, and that's okay as long as we make up for that. Nowadays, a lot of people are drinking almond milk, so we might not even be getting any protein from milk from having that option. So you're basically starting your day with maybe a couple teaspoons of sugar and maybe a whole grain, a little bit of whole grain. And so we're not completing this equation. So our blood sugar levels after a fast, first thing we put in is like processed carbohydrates and sugar. Blood sugar levels going to spike. We might feel good for maybe an hour, and that comes right back down. We crash. We feel hungry again, and we're kind of going through our day like this. So, classic example, if you want, I would go for like a lower sugar, high fiber cereal. Maybe you have it with, if you don't have any lactose sensitivities, you could do it with Greek yogurt or with yogurt or milk. You could add some whole fruit to it, and sometimes I add like chia seeds and flax seeds on top of my cereal just to make it a little bit more filling, and you don't really taste the chia and the flax. So those are just some ideas for like how to keep some of the things that you guys really enjoy in your food, but complete it a little bit bigger. So this is not like, oh, don't have cereal for breakfast. It's how do we make that cereal a little bit more all-encompassing of some of the foods that or some of the portions on our plate that we want to include. Sound good?
Absolutely.
Cool. So like even at nighttime, like I get really hungry and I'll like want a bowl of cereal before bed. But I'm like, okay, well, how do I make it work? Sometimes I'll mix yogurt and milk, so it's a little bit, it's not as thick as just straight yogurt. So it's not as thin as milk, but I'm getting myself a little bit more protein. I'll add my cereal, add chia seeds, flax seeds, some nuts. And now I've got, sometimes I'll add chocolate chips in there, so I'm kind of getting a little dessert, but I've got a little bit of everything in here. And now I feel like, you know, I've created a more well-rounded meal than just having a bunch of sugar mixed with some milk. So just some ideas for that, not to belabor that point. What did we talk about with, so we talked a little bit about meal and snack planning throughout our day. So what was something, Sadie, you said that was a takeaway for you, right? So what's something that you thought about after last class?
Well, when I was in the grocery store on Sunday night, I realized I had no plan. And I was so tired, and I was just like not making the best choices I think I could, and it's inefficient. And, like wasting too much time.
Yeah, we talked about that last time, which was the meal planning starts at the grocery store. If you don't have the kitchen stocked with options that cover all of these areas, then you're obviously not going to eat those things, or you're gonna, you know, go out to eat for something, and then that's definitely usually not planned. So yeah, starting at the grocery store, having a list. This is a great kind of checklist to run through when you're grocery shopping. Okay, do I have some easy protein options for the week, especially if time's limited? I always stock up on canned beans just to have them, so that when if I forgot to defrost some meat, or I run out of yogurt and milks, or I just need something quick, I always have some go-to like canned beans, so I'm never like out of protein. Or shrimp, like frozen shrimp, it takes 5 minutes to defrost and cook up. I always have shrimp on hand, so that just in case, you know, I forgot to plan ahead, I can always go into my freezer and do that. Same with like salmon burgers or bean burgers, or, you know, stuff that's easily can heat up, and it won't take much time.
Ooh, I got a question. What do you think about like tuna fish? Like I've heard like mercury levels for heavy metals.
Yeah, and some tuna brands will actually be like mercury tested on their labels, and so like, you know, it's definitely more expensive than some of your lower budget cans of tuna. But again, I think you have to keep it all in perspective of, you know, okay, if, you know, what's a little bit better than what I would do. Maybe it's not the most ideal scenario. Maybe frozen or canned vegetables aren't your like go-to, but if that's a little bit better than what you would do otherwise, same with the tuna, if it's better than like going home and having sugary cereal, you know, I would probably weigh that a little bit higher than the other. So you can choose. Fish is a little bit tricky because I think a lot of the fish options can be tainted with with mercury and some of the other toxins. So just being a little bit more mindful of where you're getting your tuna or fish from. Maybe paying a little bit more to get a tested brand. But I'm definitely a tuna. Like now they make those tuna packets with the spoon in them. I have one in my bag just in case I don't have a protein throughout the day, and that's an easy fix. So running through the grocery store, making sure you have some protein, making sure you've got some grain options. You know, always having oats on hand. Rices are good. Whole grains, bean pastas. Have you guys tried some? If you've done community meal prep, we use most all of our pasta dishes are bean pastas because we do have a gluten intolerance, but also because it provides us with more protein. So bean pastas are basically just made from beans instead of wheat, which is going to significantly increase the protein content, and it really doesn't taste much different. I think a lot of us eat pasta as a vehicle for the sauce, right? Whatever tastes good with it, right? And so as long as you have a good sauce, a lot of times that bean pasta tastes really good. Real quick, having veggies on hand. Like I said, a lot of times people don't eat vegetables because of the hassle that it requires, or they can require. But I can list like 5 vegetables off the top of my hand that you can buy at the store easily without prepping. You know, baby carrots, snap peas, bell peppers. The past 2 days I've had bell peppers and I eat them like apples. I don't have to cut them or wash them or anything. Or what? I do wash, but I don't have to like prep them and everything. So bell peppers, What else?
Avocado, cucumber, avocado.
Cucumbers, avocado. I think those are technically fruits because they have the seeds in them. But doesn't matter too much. All right. So yeah, so those are, and like I said, who said doesn't matter about the dip? Oh, Matt, you said that. So what my point last time was, if it's a matter of you eating more fruits and vegetables, but you need to have them with like a dip or a ranch or something that you might think is like totally going to sabotage the fact that you're eating the vegetable. My mentality around that is always having those nutrients is better than not, right? So even if you're consuming vegetables with a really high fat salad dressing or whatnot, you'd be better off having those nutrients from those fruits and vegetables than not, because your body can't make those essential nutrients otherwise. Like the reason why we have essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals that are mostly packed in our fruits and vegetables is because our body can't make them themselves. So if you're eating them and with a high fat or maybe a less healthy dip option, you're still getting those nutrients in. Yeah, it's coming in with other nutrients that might not be serving your body as well as others, but you're still getting those. So that's kind of my mentality. Then you can work on over time. You get more used to eating your vegetables. You enjoy it. Maybe you can start to switch the dip. Instead of ranch dressing, it's a Greek yogurt with a ranch seasoning mixed in. Now you have like a high protein ranch dip instead of a really high fat mayo based dip. So stuff like that. I always have frozen vegetables on hand too, because if I run out of, and you know, my weeks get busy and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have any vegetables at home, I can always pull them out of the freezer, microwave them, or put them on the stovetop. Also, like mixed greens, having just washed, ready to go greens to throw in a meal at night. Just don't judge me, but my boyfriend's gone, so I don't cook that much. So instead of making a really nice salad, I'll just take a couple handfuls of spinach and I'll just eat them, just shove them in my mouth. Or if I'm really desperate, I'm like, well,
That's really desperate.
This is just gonna. I need to get them in. And then same with fruit, right? Like fruit's usually really pretty inexpensive, especially if you're buying seasonal fruit. But having frozen fruit on hand for smoothies, or if you do overnight oats, it'll melt by the time, you know, if you put them in the fridge overnight, they're gonna thaw. So.
Do you pay any attention to which fruits or vegetables are maybe superfoods or healthier than other fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, so the question was about fruits and vegetables, which ones being superfoods. I think the biggest thing when it comes to fruits and vegetables is consuming a variety of them. So even if you, let's say, you know, pomegranates, I think technically pomegranate seeds would be like, I think they're maybe considered a superfood because of their really high antioxidant content. But if you're only eating pomegranate seeds every single day, the fact that they're a superfood or not doesn't replace the fact that you're not getting nutrients from the other different types of fruits and vegetables out there that are also important. So I think it's less important to think about which foods are superfoods and making sure you get a variety of foods. So like variety in terms of switching things up, but also switching up the colors. Like we talked about last time, every color represents a different nutrient. So, you know, your yellows are going to be all similar. Not all similar, like bell peppers and squashes, they're going to have some different nutrients, but they're also going to share some of the same nutrients because of their coloring. Same with like beets and berries, like those share some similar nutrients. So it's good. That's why like eating the rainbow is actually pretty important, because all of those colors are going to provide different nutrients to your body.
Oh, I've heard there's like this ad on YouTube. Like I don't listen to enough. I just skip it. But it's like saying tomatoes are bad for arthritis.
Yeah, nightshades. It depends on the person, and that's something. So like nightshade vegetables always get a lot of a bad rap sometimes but it depends on the person, right? Because something that's pro-inflammatory to you or someone with arthritis could be different than the rest of the group. So that's something where like eggplant. So nightshades are kind of like reddish purple, green, like dark greens.
An eggplant.
So eggplants, like dark maybe red cabbages. Tomatoes are included in that, along with some of the reds. So those a lot of times if it's a fruit and vegetable that's bad for you, usually I would approach those ads with caution, because there's no blanket like this is bad for you, this is bad for you, especially if it's like a very natural, unprocessed food. But it could, if you do have inflammation or if you do have arthritis, there are definitely people who avoid nightshades because it does cause an inflammatory response to your body. But they have to kind of test that out themselves.
So if you don't have like necessarily, let's just say like I have like an injury, my hip's inflamed, but I want to, there's a different story, right? Just like an injury or somebody who has arthritis.
Yeah, it's not a blanket term. So I wouldn't just say, oh, I gotta avoid all these foods. You could probably get tests, like do a test for that if you really wanted to. But I would say just to be cautious if you don't feel a difference whether you have the nightshades or not. I would just put more emphasis on some of the other colored fruits and vegetables, and maybe not have tons of the nightshade vegetables. But I wouldn't be like, oh, I gotta avoid tomatoes at all costs, especially in like smaller amounts. So, but good question there. So yeah, so we talked about the grocery shopping for your meal planning and snacking, having a plan, going to the grocery store with some sort of list or some sort of idea of what to buy. And then kind of what Andrew said in the beginning of class, should I eat 3 meals or should I eat 5 meals? Well, that really depends on, it depends on your schedule, first of all, depends on what your goals and your activity level is like. But I would say, I think for the most part, listening to your hunger cues, eating when you're hungry, and eating before you get really hungry. So if you have breakfast and you're keeping in mind this like balanced plate, and then let's say you eat breakfast at like 7:30, well, if you get hungry by 10:30, 3 hours later, you got to listen to that, right? We tend to create these like shoulds around food, like I shouldn't have that, and then you don't listen to your hunger cues, and everyone's hunger cues are going to be different depending on the individual, your metabolism. So it's not this, oh, we got to just eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Some people just get hungrier faster than others, and if you're making sure that you're providing your body with the right nutrients, then listen to those hunger cues. Usually they are our body speaking to us in a way that makes sense. And one sec, just to add to that, Miles. Usually, if it's a hunger that comes on very quickly, it could be an emotional hunger, stress-induced, or so the quick hunger cues, like all of a sudden you're just ravenous. Well, that potentially might not be true hunger. True hunger kind of comes on slowly. We start, we get a little hungry, we might not listen to it, then we feel it coming on a little more. We feel maybe like a little grumbling in our stomach, hangriness sometimes, and then all of a sudden you're like very hungry. So identify, and we'll talk about this when we get into mindful eating, but a lot of times that hunger starts to build, whereas if all of a sudden you're just craving something, that's usually a stress or emotion-induced craving instead of hunger, instead of true hunger. So listening to that. What were you going to ask, Miles?
Oh, so say I follow this like pretty well, and I like kind of have like a routine, kind of solves the whole like fumbling around the grocery store to go bam, is it good to kind of follow that, or do you want to mix it up more often?
Yeah, so like if you're following this, I'd still make sure, like, especially if you're only eating for one person, you might not be getting, your variety might be fairly limited each time you go to the grocery store. Maybe you get a couple vegetables, a couple fruit, maybe it's like two, couple protein options and whole grains. But the next time you go to the store, it's okay to eat the same thing for several, days in a row, maybe even a week. But I definitely would encourage you to switch it up the next time you go to the store. So, choosing a couple different vegetables, choosing a couple different fruits and whole grains and proteins so that you're getting that variety in. We're okay to eat the same thing, for weeks or a week or so or days. But ideally, we want to make sure we're switching up those nutrients and we're choosing different options. So, yeah, Chris.
What if your body tells you it feels like eating like all the way up until you go to bed?
Like constantly?
Is it bad to eat right before you go to sleep? Or you should stop eating for a second before you go to bed?
Well, let me answer, because I thought you were going to go differently with that one. So let me answer that. Let me answer the first with what I thought. So another thing is, if you're eating a meal like this and you get hungry, like start noticing your food habits. But if you eat a meal and you've got a little bit of everything, you also include a little bit of fat, of course. So if you make sure this is represented for, and you're hungry like an hour and a half later, like truly hungry, then you might need to revisit this and increase some of these portions, right? So if you are eating, and we'll talk about this like hunger scale, but if you're eating and you're not really touching this ideal range of like, comfortably full or satisfied with your meal, then you probably need to increase your portions. So I think a lot of us think in our head like, oh, I shouldn't eat more than this, or this should fill me up. But if you're really in tune, and that's why we're going to talk about mindful eating and intuitive eating, like by picking up on some of those hunger cues and satiety cues, then we can actually come up with what seems to be appropriate for for portion sizes for you as an individual. Now, eating right before bed, kind of mixed reviews on that, I think, for a lot of people. Ideally, before bed, you're not getting this big blood sugar spike, so we're trying to avoid like really high sugar. That would be across the board for your day. We're never looking to just drive that blood sugar level up. And so some people before bed, it's a big snacking time. And so that's when I would encourage having some snack options that are going to include at least 2 of these categories here, so that you're not just getting, you're not just getting all grains. Maybe honestly, you could just, having a piece of fruit wouldn't spike the blood sugar. Having some protein wouldn't. Having some vegetables, of course, wouldn't. But I think if you have a big sweet tooth at night, potentially, or just eating more food. So you might be someone where, you have to, maybe you're like a 5 or 6 smaller meals a day kind of guy. Or maybe you need to look at your dinner and, make sure that you're getting enough of all of these areas. But it's totally appropriate to have a pre-bed snack. I'd say for some people, it interferes with their sleeping, and you have to think about bedtime as, even though you're asleep, your body's not asleep. But in an ideal scenario of deep REM sleep, your digestive tract isn't like trying to digest food. Like you're not going to reach that fully deep state of sleep when your body is still trying to digest food. And that could be when we're lying horizontally, our digestion isn't working as efficiently as if we're standing or moving around a little bit. That seems to help with digestion. So having at least an hour, hour and a half, ideally 2 hours before bed, before you're actually asleep, to digest food is kind of that general recommendation to help with digestion and make sure that when you're asleep, you can get into a deeper state of sleep more quickly and for longer because you're not digesting. So hopefully that helps. Any questions about that? No? Okay, cool. So now let's get into the mindful eating. I want to so I don't have a sheet for this. I have a sheet. You have the intuitive eating sheet. But these are they're called the basics of mindful eating. And I won't take too much time on this, but I wrote them out for you guys because this can be helpful in terms of when we talk about mindful. Well, first of all, when we talk about mindful eating, what do you guys think of mindfulness?
Well, think about what
Being
you
aware.
Yeah, being aware. Yeah. What did you say, Andrew?
Is this healthy for me? Do I really need to eat all this?
Mm-hmm.
Just think through it.
Thinking, being present.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
Not watching TV or zoning out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not being distracted. So being present, being here now with your food, not being distracted. Because what happens when we're distracted and we're eating?
You just keep going.
It's like autopilot, right? You're just like hand, mouth. So yeah, making sure that we're in an environment that is not distracting us. So the basics, so this is kind of like a little bit of a recommended checklist, if you will, for how to be mindfully. So the B in the basics is breathe and belly check. So the breathe and belly check is kind of is kind of seeing where your hunger's at, right? Okay, how hungry am I? Am I really hungry? Am I emotional eating? Is this what I really want, this food? Assess your food. So kind of like we talked about seeing what your options are, giving clarity with your food. A lot of times we just want to immediately grab the first thing that is in our visual, right, to when we're really hungry. So assessing kind of all of our options and maybe even coming up with a little bit of a plan here with our My Plate recommendations. Assess your food, see what your options are, and make a choice that you feel like will be benefiting you. Slow down. This is a big one, and I'm guilty of this too, but like not chewing, you actually don't absorb as many nutrients from your food if you don't chew them as thoroughly. So chewing a little bit extra is going to help break that food down for you so that your stomach and your digestive tract doesn't have to work as hard to extract those nutrients. So slowing down, maybe taking a bite, setting the fork down, chewing. It's like so many of us like we eat and then we have another stack full of food ready to go as we're chewing. I love watching my boyfriend eat. It's like fascinating to me because he's just like here, and then he gets his next fork ready, and I'm just looking at him like, are you gonna chew that all before you get the next bite? But I think we're all a little guilty of the shovel, right? The shovel.
What if it's like a food that doesn't necessarily need to be chewed?
Like a smoothie?
Well, like, so I smash my oatmeal in the morning because I'm trying to be healthy, but I gotta get to fucking work, so I oatmeal. No, I don't even put it in a bowl. I just take the pot and yeah.
That's how pelicans eat.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I take off to work.
That's actually a really good question. So there's foods that, so obviously us mechanically breaking down our food and chewing slower is going to be helpful for a slower, for a more thorough digestion. But then there's foods that, we talked about this a little bit last time, high fiber foods that are going to actually take longer to digest in our stomach. They're not going to pass through our stomach very quickly because of the fiber content. And oatmeal is one of those. So that's actually, so you're helping yourself in the way that you're choosing a high fiber, slow digesting food, but you consuming it very quickly is still probably not as beneficial as like going a little bit slower with that. But again, it's much better that you're choosing a high fiber food than like just inhaling a bunch of really processed flours and sugars. So kind of, I'd say slow it down a little bit if you can.
You're gonna smash it.
But
Maybe wake
Is that
up.
oatmeal smoothie or what is that exactly?
Maybe. Okay, so we got, hold on guys, so we've got slowing down, right? We're slowing down, yes.
What about this thing that I hear that you can eat faster than your brain knows that you're full, or like.
Oh yeah, and that's a great point. Is another aspect of eating more slowly is because it takes some time for our digestive tract to send signals to our brain that actually, hey, we're full. Like stop putting food in your mouth. And so a lot of times, like I don't know if you guys have ever like ordered appetizers at a restaurant and you eat some, and then the meal takes forever to come. And at first you're annoyed, you're really hungry, but then you're like, actually, I'm kind of full already. And so it takes some time, but by slowing our food, we're not going to by chewing our food more slowly, maybe not shoveling it down as quickly. We might realize that after one plate, we're actually pretty full and we're not ready for, and we're full or comfortably full before we need to get a second plate. So that could be really helpful in portion sizing and intuitive eating of like, real understanding, do I need more? Does my body want more? Or did I just eat a little bit too quickly? And should I wait a couple minutes? And if I'm still hungry, I can get a second serving or something. That's why it's kind of nice to have, you start your meal off with your vegetables or a salad, then, you're starting to get a little bit fuller off of some of those really nutrient dense, but lower calorie options, especially if you're maybe not a very active individual and your expenditure is not very high throughout the day. Starting with some of these lower calorie but nutrient packed foods will be helpful because you're not going to be as hungry for your necessarily some of these grains that can really pack in a lot of energy. So like a lot of times when I eat, for me, I personally struggle with getting enough protein in sometimes, so I'll prioritize my protein and my vegetables. I always pretty much make time. Fruit's a big snack for me all throughout the day, but I'll prioritize protein and vegetables. And then, whatever I'm still hungry for after that is going to be more of my grains. And that seems to work out pretty well. So great question, Jeremy. So slowing down food. Then the next one is investigate your hunger throughout your meal. So it kind of ties in with slowing it down, but, as you eat, check in with yourself. Obviously there's a lot of people that just like will eat whatever's on their plate. And it can be a ton of it or a little bit of it, but it's going to be gone because it's in front of them. And so, especially with portion sizes in America, right? We've got big portions and we think we just have to eat it all, especially at restaurants for dinner. And you want more because you get more bang for your buck. But being able to be like, actually, no, I'm pretty full. I'm going to box this up and take it home. But checking in throughout the meal, like, am I still really hungry? Am I starting to feel full? Am I going to eat, if I eat the rest of this, am I going to be like beyond comfortably full and kind of regret eating that because I'm going to feel like crap after? So really being mindful throughout the entire process of your meal. We talked about this with the slow down, but chew your food thoroughly. You know, we're really going to make sure we're like, and this kind of ties in with like savoring your food. When you chew it more slowly, you start to pick up on different flavors and textures, and you kind of sit with your meal and be like, wow, this is really good. And let yourself enjoy that process instead of just a means to an end of just shoveling food into your mouth. So this is a great way to be mindful. And when we're more mindful, then we start to trust our bodies a little bit more in telling us when we're hungry, when we need to eat, and we can act upon those. So I gave you guys this, and we'll review the intuitive eating principles. So these are kind of, well, I think intuitive eating is different than mindful eating because of a couple things, but I want to hear what you guys think. So we talked about mindful eating, being present, being aware, minimizing distractions. Intuitive eating is a little bit different. What do you guys, when you hear intuitive eating, what do you guys think about? Like intuition. What is being intuitive?
Like trusting yourself.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing to me is trusting yourself to know what's best for your body. It's not what someone else says you should do. Miles, it's not someone else telling you that nightshade vegetables are bad for your arthritis or what you're dealing with your joints. It's you intuitively or being aware of how certain foods make you feel. If something makes you feel kind of worse off after you eat it, or if it makes you feel good and you feel like your body responds well to it. A lot of food sensitivities are a result of people just being intuitive or aware and trusting that their body doesn't like something or it does. So like, feeling bloated or a little bit nauseous afterwards, like, yeah, my gut's telling me literally maybe that, this food is probably not the best choice for me. So these are some of the principles, again, more of like just things to be mindful of when it comes to intuitive eating to be aware of. So rejecting the diet mentality around food. So a lot of times with diet mentalities, it's telling you don't do this or avoid that, and there's really no rhyme or reason to it other than just sticking to some rigid set of rules that your body may or may not respond well to. So trying not to think of being on a diet and more so thinking about, well, how do I make the things I'm eating a little bit better? I always adopt an inclusive approach to nutrition when I'm working with any individual in their intake. It's more of, okay, what is your nutrition missing that we need to add in? It's never, well, you shouldn't drink that Coke or take out all your desserts or no sugar, no this. It's more of, gosh, you don't have a lot of like whole fruit in your diet. Can we start to add that in? Or can we try to get, vegetables at lunch and dinner once that comes? Or maybe your protein is low, or maybe a lot of your grains aren't whole. Maybe they're minimally processed. So it's trying to get yourself to think about how you can add some more of these things into your diet or into your nutrition. And then as by default, you're automatically just, some things are going to go by the wayside. Because if you're eating a bunch of this stuff and now you're trying to add fruit and vegetables and leaner proteins in, something's got to go out the back door, right? Or else you're going to be eating like 3 times this amount. And you're probably going to get full. Miles, do you have a question?
Oh, I want this not be I want to be taken seriously, but like intuitive eating. And you're like beans and like eggs are like really good protein source, but make you not fit for public kind of.
Yeah.
I know it's funny and giggly, but they made me definitely.
Yeah, and that's true. And so for beans for some people are really can be especially in high volumes. Maybe they work so well for individuals, but doesn't mean they shouldn't be included or can't be included in smaller amounts. Or, so maybe it's something where the bean isn't going to replace all of your protein, but maybe you add it in with some rice or on top of your salad or just in some things, and maybe you can tolerate that. But what you can tolerate and what you can't.
Is it like a negative thing, or is it just for other people's negative? Like trying to be serious still.
No, I mean, yeah. So the reason why we get like gassy or have like some reactions to beans is that there's a lot of fiber in beans, and so the gas is actually a result of so fiber. One of the great things about fiber is that actually is the fuel, the nutrition for your gut bacteria, the good gut bacteria that we need to affect our gut health. So if we eat high fiber foods, your gut is likely going to be very happy and healthy. And so beans have a ton of fiber in them, and so the methane gas that produces, are obviously what we don't want to expel around people. That's as a result of your bacteria. That's like a reaction that your good gut bacteria has in terms of like in digesting or processing that fiber. And so it's hard because it's so good for you, but it's not good for others, right? And so again, I think that's where you can kind of in very maybe small amounts throughout your day, or maybe you leave it out together. It's not to say if you don't have beans in your diet, your diet's not healthy. Again, there's so many other things to focus on, but maybe not writing it off completely just because of that, or seeing how well your body can tolerate that. We'll go to number 2 is honoring your hunger. We talked about this, trusting that like when your body is truly hungry and you didn't just come on all of a sudden, but you started feeling that hunger and you were aware of it, you acknowledged it, and maybe it grew bigger and bigger over the course of an hour or two. Acknowledging it, be like, I'm gonna fuel myself, and being okay with that, not feeling ashamed or like, well, I shouldn't eat. It's like, who came up with that rule for you, right? Making peace with food. So this is a big one because a lot of times we think that we have to cut out a lot like foods in our diet. I think even Sharon, you said something like eating chocolate, and it's not to say I don't want anyone to think that they can't include any foods into their diet. I think there's always room to have everything, and I truly mean this. Like people always ask me like what I eat or what I don't eat, and I will eat anything. But the majority of my intake, I focus on this stuff. Like I said, I like to have, before bed if I'm hungry. I love chocolate. I love ice cream. I love all these things. But I try to incorporate them into my nutrition in a way that I'm still focusing. It's not maybe the highlight. Maybe the chocolate isn't like the dessert that I have. Maybe it's with something else. Or maybe like with my ice cream, maybe I can put some, mix it with some nuts or some nut butter or, chia seeds, flax. Like, again, those are kind of my go-to because they're so easy to throw onto things. Or maybe I'm choosing an ice cream, but maybe I choose something that's a little bit healthier than, some of our like Ben and Jerry's really high fat stuff. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good.
I've heard cottage cheese is like a natural like sugar blocker, like craving for. Have you ever heard anything like that? Like people struggle with sugar cravings. If
you have sugar cravings, I think proteins just in general are going to be the most filling and provide you with, they're the most filling of all of the macronutrients of our protein, carbs, between protein, carbs, and fat. So cottage cheese would be a great option, for high protein. Most people are a little bit lower on protein throughout the day. And so, yeah, if you're maybe craving one thing that's high in sugar, most of our sugar and fat cravings and salt cravings are completely, not always, but oftentimes those are more of our like emotional hunger. Those aren't true hunger. So, and foods are made to be that way. So like high sugar foods just make you want to eat more and more, drink more and more. Same with salt, same with fat. So that's why it's important that maybe you start your meal with these things, and then if you have a side of chips or cookies or something, you're ending with that, but you've started off with this. For me, if I have cookies around the house and then I have this type of meal, I know that I can't start with cookies because I'm not going to want anything else here. And then I always want to end with something sweet. Like dessert's always great for after having a really hearty dinner because you're not going to be as hungry for all those sweets, and you're not going to tend to not overeat so much of those other foods. challenge the food police. So when people are like, oh, well, you shouldn't eat this, or telling you that you should go low carb, or that this is bad for you, trying to dismiss a lot of things that people say, because everyone wants to be an expert just because they tried something, or they heard something from their Aunt Sally. And so I think it's really important to be mindful and aware of where your information is coming from, and make sure it's credible sources. And you guys, but by being here, I see all of you guys all the time. So feel free to talk to me at any point. Like, hey, I heard this. Is this true? Or, just making sure that you're not taking every single influencer and making sure that you're not just buying into what they're doing and what they're saying. Respecting your fullness, we talked about this. Kind of finding that 4, 5, 6 out of 10, 1 being starving, 10 being stuffed, and finding that happy medium. It's like, yeah, I'm not beyond stuffed, but I know I'm going to eat again, and I'll listen to my hunger cues when they come back later. So I'm okay stopping here, instead of if we don't honor our hunger and fullness, then we feel like every time we eat, you got to go through this binge cycle of like, I don't know when the next time I'm going to eat again, or because we're not kind to ourselves, and we don't tend to listen to our bodies when they are hungry. So when we finally eat, it might be this really big overkill in terms of how much we're eating, and then we go long because we feel ashamed and guilty of that. Then we go through a long period of time where we won't let ourselves eat, and then that cycle creates itself again. We go from starving to completely stuffed, starving to completely stuffed. So only a couple more, and then I'll let you guys go. Discover the satisfaction factor. Enjoying foods. They're meant to be nourishing, but they're also we should get enjoyment out of food too. So not trying to think that just because something is yummy and might not be the most nutrient dense, like being okay with eating those things because everything can fit into a healthy diet. Honor your feelings without food. So if you're stressed and you feel like you need to have something high sugar, high salt, high fat, figuring out maybe a different outlet to help you get beyond that. So, talking to someone, walking, going for a walk, getting some fresh air. There's a lot of things that we can go to that aren't going to necessarily be food. Respect your body. Come back, we say this, or I've said this time and time again, like, if you have that good relationship with your body, then you're likely not going to give into a lot of the diet culture and fad stuff that you hear constantly. So just being nice to our body. Exercise, you guys do plenty of that, I see you in here. But also acknowledging that movement is exercise too. I think sometimes the mindset in here with you guys, and me too sometimes, like, oh, if I don't go hard and I'm not at the gym, then it doesn't count. And I think that's a really that can be a black and white mentality that can be a little bit, that can be very negative and cause some damage in certain scenarios, where it's kind of like we talked about with having our active recovery days and then having our workout days, and acknowledging that active recovery is good for us. It doesn't always have to be high intensity, going for a walk, walking the dog, just being outside and movement of any kind is going to be helpful for us. And then honoring your health and trying to, most of the time, think about what's best for your body and also what's going to appeal your taste buds, but if honoring your body does not mean having everything that you're craving all at once, and knowing that there's a balance between giving your body the foods it needs, but also listening to your hunger cues and some of the foods that you like. So I think that covers, we'll talk, I think we covered pretty much most of that today. So again, more things of like how to approach food that I think would be really helpful to apply as you address your food and your meals throughout the day. We'll certainly dive into some of the supplements and the sports nutrition and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, this is like the meat and potatoes of food intake and planning, and how you view food and all of that throughout the day. So I want to start there. Next class, I'm not entirely sure what we're going to talk about, but it'll be helpful, I'm hoping. So any questions from our participants before I let you guys go? Appreciate you guys staying tuned in for so long.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Karina.
Guys, absolutely. I will see you all hopefully at the gym here soon, okay? Have a great night, and I'll post this video. I mean, you guys are already here, but I'll post it on Facebook, and it'll be on YouTube too.
It'll be posted?
It'll be posted and then it'll be on YouTube. So, all right. Much love to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina.
Thanks, Andy. Bye, guys.